What happens if an AI created clone has sex, virtually of course, with another AI created clone? Before you jump to conclusions, yes, I am being serious. Stay around for a bit, because in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to explain why this is not only a serious question, it's about the total collapse of the boundary between the biological and the digital. That shift is the new reality for PR pros and communicators. Whether you call them avatars, clones, or data driven duplicates, I didn't think much about them until I fell through a YouTube rabbit hole. I landed at a video with a compelling value proposition. I could easily create stunning, realistic spokespersons who speak directly to your audience. That's a promise that a PR guy can't just walk away from. So I decided to take a closer look. I could make a clone of myself in about 10 minutes. Then I could simply type a script that I wanted my clone to say. I could adjust my voice, add media, and do all sorts of things to make a video without a camera. Since then, I have created a bunch of virtual versions of myself. I use the HeyGen platform, which is widely considered to be the leader in the space, but the alternatives are increasing rapidly, as is the quality of the videos you can create. In fact, I'm being a virtual version of myself right now. Sort of. You aren't seeing me as captured by a camera. Instead, you are seeing me as data assembled into an image of the guy you're watching right now, or at least the guy you think you're watching right now. Now, look at me for a moment. I'm using the entry level version of the HeyGen platform. I'll upgrade to their premium version when I understand all this better. But in the meantime, this is pretty good, and it is only going to get better in a few years. If you define better clones as images that become increasingly difficult to determine if they are real or just a bunch of pixels that seem to be talking about something somebody wrote for the clone to say. In other words, determining what is real and what is digital is going to be a lot more difficult. It will probably require a new definition of what real is. That's the serious part of this discussion. Trying to understand what the problem is today, and more seriously, what this all evolves into over the next couple of years, not to mention 10 years from now. Brace yourself, because the problem is going to become way more complicated and more disruptive. What happens, for example, when AI technology is married with quantum computing power? Could my clone use AI to create a clone of my clone that not only emulates the way I look, but writes a script for the clone of my clone? I'm curious about what a second generation clone of me would look like. And even if the new clone looked and sounded exactly like me, how much of the second generation clone will actually be a clone of me or just of my clone? Actually, maybe I shouldn't use the word actually, because I do not know if actually exists, especially in the future. When you start asking questions like that, that's when it becomes possible to end up with a question like, what happens if a clone has virtual sex with another clone? Let's assume that somehow you saw two clones having virtual sex. You are absolutely convinced what you saw was very real. Nobody is going to convince you otherwise. You know what you saw and heard, and what you saw and heard looked real. Just like I look pretty close to real right now, despite the fact that I am using the basic version of a platform that is still early in its life cycle. So, You are going to believe your own eyes, and you absolutely believe that you saw two clones having virtual sex. And that brings us to the most basic question of all. When we start understanding how this isn't just a curious issue, but a critical issue, I'm starting to think that there needs to be a new definition of what it means to exist. That's a pretty fundamental issue. Philosophers have considered it for as long as there has been philosophers. Now, there is a new dimension to existence as the virtual is being perceived as real. And when a 10th grader has the power to manufacture an entire reality that is indistinguishable from the truth, we aren't just facing a tech problem, we're facing an existential one. Trust is the most essential component of any effort to communicate. The human may be entering a global crisis of trust. If you can't trust what you are hearing and seeing, how can you communicate? We don't have the answer yet, but we better start looking for it. See you next time.